all of a sudden there was this bright light and I was in what looked like a hospital corridor. And at the very end of it, there was a demon, big, ugly being that just radiated hate. And he starts running down this hall towards me, carrying a stick or something. And I freaked out and I looked to the left and right and there's doors on either side of me. But when I turned around, he was right in my face. It was huge. And there was piles and piles of all these dead corpses. It smelled bad. It was just awful.
Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me today for another near-death experience interview today with Kathy McDaniel. You guys are always asking me, what about the hellish experiences? So when I heard her story, I knew I have got to get her on and I've got to ask her all of our hardest questions, which I did. I want to give a trigger warning because some of the content in this interview could be disturbing for some. However, I want to emphasize that Kathy's message is so incredibly inspiring and comforting. If you can watch through this interview and get to the insights that she shares afterwards, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to the show, Kathy.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Of course. And I love to have you start by sharing your near-death experience with us in whatever way you feel led.
Okay. It started off with me being asked to be a caregiver for my best friend who had leukemia. He was 52 and I had retired and sold my business. I was very lucky to be able to do that. And I said, sure. And it was supposed to be 3 to 5 months, but he hung on and we encouraged him to do so. But it took 8 months and he finally passed away. And by then I was pretty much an emotional and physical wreck with very little sleep and all the trauma. I caught a flu that was going around. That turned into pneumonia and then into ARDS. Another friend of mine, thank goodness, got me to the hospital in time. There was no pulse in the ambulance. They had to restart me. And I just have like flashes of what was happening there. It was the last thing I really remember is the ball going down, December 31st, 1999. That was the big turnover to the century, and that stuck in my mind. And then I remember seeing my dad. There was a little window on the door of the ICU, and he was just giving me a thumbs up because the doctor had told me, we can't keep your oxygen levels up, and we're going to have to intubate you and put you into a coma. And you won't remember anything that happens. We're giving you this drug, white amnesia or something. So you just go to sleep. You'll be fine. Well, he was right. I remembered nothing about the medical procedures, but I can remember everything to this day, almost 22 years later, of what happened when I found myself in the darkness. And I just woke up in complete darkness. No sound. Didn't know if I was standing on something, sitting on something. I thought, well, am I in a closet? What happened? Something went wrong. And as I kind of sat there, it started to turn kind of reddish, like a sun was coming up. And I thought, okay. And then it got kind of foggy with this sun reddish. And then it started getting warm. And then it started smelling kind of bad. And then I heard these shrieks and moaning in the background. And I'm trying to see through this because I thought, what's going on? And this terrible voice came out of the fog and it said, do you know where you are? And I had to quick and come up with an answer. And the only thing that made any sense at all was hell. And he just boomed out this horrible maniacal laugh on a terrible horror movie show. And I just took off into the darkness. I had to get away. It was like fight or flight. And the next thing I knew, I was in this completely burned out, ruined city. Like it looked like New York with all the buildings toppled, the windows blown out. There's fires all over the place, big pieces of concrete rebar sticking out of them. And again, it was like, I had no idea I was dead. I just thought it was me and something went very wrong somewhere. I didn't know where I was. I thought I was still on Earth. So I thought, well, that's what happened. There was an atomic explosion. So I tried to like hide in this little crevice I found just to kind of get a lay of the land because I could hear all these noises and screaming and stuff. And I thought, oh gosh, maybe all kinds of things go through your mind. So I didn't see what I thought was another person kind of huddled down over there. And I thought, oh, great. Somebody survived. I said, hello, why don't we get together? I'll come over there and maybe we can find some food or get some, something. And the guy just came back with this kind of echoey voice. It's like, we are all alone here. Okay. So then I start hearing these kind of weird scuttling noises. I see people that kind of look like zombies coming out of the fog, and it's all in great detail in the book. I'll just shorten it up for you. I ran. And it's like this. I'm trying to climb up walls and get around, and all of a sudden, boom, I'm back in the dark, but there's like this scene in front of me, like a movie set. And again, I'm thinking, what is going on? But at least it wasn't on fire. That turned into a weird scene because here's a person that I know from my family with these other two people and they're doing this movie scene. And I thought, oh, well, thank heavens, and I kind of climbed up on the set and she looked at me and says, oh, you look like hell. Sit down here. And I said I did. And it was like a beauty parlor scene. And they were telling me that all I needed to do was fix my hair and a little makeup and all this other stuff. And I said, no, you people don't understand what's going on here. Something from the outside is not going to fix what's going on here. Well, they poo-pooed everything. And so I left. I just got back into the dark. But then this road kind of appeared. And this road it showed up every time between the scenes. I'd find myself on this road. And it was like being in the desert at twilight. There was no moon or stars or anything, but it was just enough to where you could see that was a rocky kind of gravelly road. And there was nothing much on the landscape, maybe some sort of pile of rocks or some dead tree or something along the way. And I would look behind myself and look in the front, afraid of what was going to come out of the dark. But since it was flat, I figured if I could just keep creeping along, maybe I could get out of here because there was definitely a mistake. I shouldn't be here. But then I would come to another scenario, or it would just flash me into another place. All of a sudden, there was this bright light, and I was in what looked like a hospital corridor. And at the very end of it, there was a demon. I mean, there was just no other way to describe that big, ugly being that just radiated hate or something. And he starts running down this hall towards me, carrying something, stick or something. And I freaked out and I looked to the left and right and there's doors on either side of me. But when I turned around, he was right in my face. And I just stood there like, and he says, you've got a job here, And I said, job? And he says, yes, you go into that room over there and take what they give you and you take it over and you put it in that room over there. That's your job. And he stood there. And I thought, okay, well, all right. I'm just going to play along. And the minute I get a chance to slip out of here, find a door or something, I'm out of here. So I went into this room and I was surprised because it was all these people on gurneys, like they were having procedures or something, but they were obviously women and their legs were spread and there was a sheet in front of their legs and there was a doctor between their legs. And I thought, what? Are they getting pap tests? Or I didn't know what was going on and I didn't know I was there. And this doctor raised his hand and it was all bloody and he turned around. He says, get over here. So I went over and he says, take this. And he had been doing an abortion on this woman and he slapped this poor little desecrated baby and all the stuff into my arms and says, don't just stand there. Take it over back to the hall. So I was disgusted and terrified. And what have I gotten myself into? So I just wandered back into the hall and that demon's pointing to the other room. So I was in shock and I walked over and I looked in this room and it looked like a great big Costco. It was huge. And there was piles and piles of all these dead corpses of babies. And I just it smelled bad. It was just awful. So I put this poor little thing down and I backed out into the hallway. And he says, get back over there. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it. And he really raised this thing up and he says, you have no idea what you're inviting by that. And I says, well, I'm not staying here. And he says, you're right. And boom, it was out again. Well, this went on. And unfortunately, it got worse. Again, I didn't know, except that I had to keep moving. I had to keep trying to get out. I wasn't, wherever I was, there had to be a way out of here. So it went on and on. I got to the worst and the final part of it. Again, I got in great detail in the book. It's just too hard to talk about it. People don't really want to hear about it. Maybe they do, but I don't feel comfortable. I got to the end. I didn't know it was going to be the end, but I was in a very bad situation again with other women in this horrible, drafty shack. Snow was piled up high outside. We'd had to walk miles in the snow with these ragged clothes. And we were somewhere in the middle of freaking nowhere with this woman kind of demon that told us we had a new job and we would just be waiting for customers. Well, that didn't sound good. And I had been there when it felt like if I had to put a time on it, there's no clocks, no wristbands, nothing down there. So I guessed around 2 years. I was wandering around down there. I was getting very tired. They had been telling me all along, if you'll just despair, if you just give up, you're not getting out of here. If you just give up, things will be easier for you. And I thought, no, I'm not gonna stay here. I'm just not. So I was not looking forward to this next, whatever was going to happen to us. And I said to this hulking, terrible woman, I've been here a long time. And this feels like a particularly bad day. I don't have days here, but I don't know what else to call it. And she just quipped, well, it's heaven on earth. It's always the worst day in hell. Hell, Christmas. I thought, oh, great. So I thought, okay, Christmas. And I started singing Away in a Manger. That's my favorite Christmas carol. Well, she freaked out and told me to stop. She's yelling at me. And these other ladies, all right, they start singing along too. Away in a manger, no crib for his bed, the little Lord Jesus. We got to the word Jesus. It didn't get out of our mouths. And this thing came barreling at me, screaming no at the top of her lungs. And here's the bright light. But the bright light this time is beautiful. And I feel like I'm swimming in love. That's all I can. Every cell of me was just bursting with love and joy and happiness. It was just overwhelmingly wonderful. I mean, and everything else receded. I couldn't remember. All I knew is I was here. That was the only thoughts I had at the time. But then I looked over and there was this like table and a big book open and my friend who had died a month ago. And there he was. And he died a terrible death, lost all his hair and got all purple. And he looked great. He looked about 35 years old. He was happy. He was wearing something I gave him for Christmas. And I thought, oh my gosh, he doesn't know he's dead. I don't want to be the one to tell him. And he just started laughing. He thought that was great. And I thought, why? I didn't say anything. How did he know what I was saying? And then I thought, oh, can I dare think that I'm dead? Yippee, I'm in heaven with my best friend. And I said in my mind, show me, let's go. Why are we standing here? And he said, now, Mary Kay, you've got too much left to do. What? That's a terrible joke. It's not funny. And I looked over at that table again and I realized that he'd been showing me something in that book. And I can only imagine because it's not okay to remember a lot of stuff when you get back, because it takes all the fun out of it to be on Earth, not knowing what the heck you're supposed to be doing. That's just the way it goes. And so I woke up and I couldn't move and it was hot. And I thought, oh God, here we go again. But my family was there. I think that's who it was, and I was had no idea what was going on. So they're all there praising God and they're coming over and giving me kisses. And I still got that thing in my throat, so I can't talk. And thank God, because I was not happy to be there, believe me. I thought that was a blessing for them. And they're telling me, you've been sick and you've been in a coma and we didn't think you would live and all that other stuff. And I thought, why can't I move? Why can't I talk? Why am I so hot? Well, I weighed 86 pounds. I'd lost all my muscle mass, so I could not move. I could move one finger and I could blink. That was it. And I thought, this is reverberating in my head. You've got too much left to do. And I thought, how is this going to, come on. So I was finally, after a couple of days, they gave me something to stick in my throat so I could talk. And I sounded like a robot. I could talk, but at least I could talk. They had to start all over. I was like an infant. I had to learn. I had no muscles, so I had to call PT. I had to go to a rehab facility for PT for a month. I had to work 7 days a week trying to learn how to crawl, how to use my hands, how to button, how to feed myself, how to swallow, literally like an infant. So when they were trying to get me to get more muscle in my back, they put me in a chair and tied me in it. And I would have to be there for like an hour at a time. And it was cramping all up and down my spine and legs. It was awful. The whole thing was awful. And I was very angry. I was very angry to be sent back. So after total month in the hospital in CCU, then another whole month, 30 days in a physical rehab, I finally went home. Well, I had no home. And thank God the friend of mine who I'd casually been dating and got me to the hospital in time had been at my guest bedside every day. And he asked me to marry him. And I said, sure. Yeah, you're a really nice person. You saved my life. I don't know a whole lot about you, but I have no home. I have no job. I have nothing. And my folks, since, you can come back and live with us. Well, I was 53 years old. I thought, nah, it's not an option. So we went back to his house, and slowly but surely I got my life back. It took me 6 months to be the least bit happy about being on this planet. And I was not very good company. And I was still haunted by the demons. I remembered heaven so wonderfully, but then there was that little bit of doubt. Wonder if next time I die, I have to go through that all again. It was awful. And so I started writing. I started writing it because it wasn't going away, because my family says, oh, it's just a dream. It was the drugs. And the doctor says, you had white amnesia. You can't remember anything. And I thought, you don't know what you're talking about here, pal. I do. And so a lot of time went by, about 10 years. I couldn't find anybody to talk to. Then all of a sudden, all these strange coincidences started dominoing left and right. Synchronicities now I know that they are, but it was time. It was time, I guess, for me to process some of that and be able to be grounded enough to move on and use that information. Anyway, through a long series of impossible situations, I found myself at an IONS meeting. It was very weird. I said to walk into a place where people say, did you have a near-death experience? And I say, I think so. And I would listen. I went and I would listen, but everybody had angels and saw their pets. And I didn't fit. I thought, well, this was close, but I know this isn't it. Then I didn't come, and then I came again, and somebody said, well, you need to read Howard Storm or Nancy Evans Bush or some of these people who had We called it dark then, dark near-death experiences. Maybe that'll help. I read everything I could get my hands on, and there wasn't much, but Nancy Evans Bush became my heroine. And she came up with she's got like 3 books. I read them cover to cover. But she came up with this thing that really resonated with me, and it was the distressing or dark experiences are usually given to brave souls. And I thought, brave? I thought, I would love to be called brave instead of damned. That's a step up. And I read on, and it was something to the effect that I started studying 4 years of Latin. And so we studied all the ancient Greek heroes that they would go down into the Hades, down into hell, and bring back the fair princess, or bring back the jewel of great price, or bring back something. That they were heroes because they would dare death to go down and bring something of importance back to humanity. So I thought, I'll go with that. I'll just think about that. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, what did I learn? What would be of value? Something like that. And I thought, well, after talking to all these IANS people, to going to conferences, to listening to one person after another, I finally got it. All these people went right to heaven. There was no judgment, I was told. There's no God up there that's vengeful and mean and will send you to hell. Everybody goes to heaven, and we've been in heaven to start with. We're just pieces of God's, our souls are pieces of God, and we go through this elaborate plan, pre-planning our lives. We want to learn experiences on earth. You might get a little bored being in heaven when everybody's reading your thoughts and nothing's new. So it might be kind of fun to go down and see what empathy is, see what bravery is, see what kindness is like as a contrast, because you can't understand something unless you really know the contrast. So I was okay with that. I thought, so I planned all of this to come down here and have all these experiences, some of them very tragic and horrible, so that I would learn things and help other people learn things. Oh, yes, you've got your soul group, and you set it out, and the guides have to kind of put the stamp on it, and then you get to go, and then you come back, and then the guides are there, and you get this life review, and you get to see how you did. It's like a no-fail test. You get to see how it was your whole life, what you did, what you experienced, how you influenced people, how things changed because you were on the planet. And then you get to flip it around and see how it felt to interact with you. So to be your sister, to be your friend, to be that bum on the street, to be that boss you just can't stand, how it felt for them. How did you interact with those people? And there's no judgment. You just kind of, I'm told, say, wow, I knocked it out of the park there, but probably didn't do so well there. That would be something I'd work again on if I went back again. So my whole life changed. My whole feeling, the biggest thing that went away was the feeling of being a victim, of God picking. Why did God kill my little 2-day-old baby and take my baby? Terrible way she died. Why did God do that? I'm so mad at God. But to be able to say, oh, well, that baby only wanted to come down to earth for a short period of time, loves me dearly, and says, I'll go along for the ride. 9 months and 2 days, and I'm out of there. But I will help you go through that. So all of those things made me see that I had nobody to blame but myself. But it wasn't a blame. It was, I want to learn something. So now here I am 20-something years later, and things are still happening. My best friend is now in the hospital. They don't know what's wrong with him. He's been there 12 days. I'm going to go see him this afternoon. They wouldn't let me in because of COVID. Talking to him on the phone is like, what happened? Blah, blah, blah. What's going on? It's like, no. Last night I said to him, we planned this. We just don't remember. He goes, that's right. And I says, you planned it, be sick and not know what was going on. And I planned to be there at that time so I could help you. Let's figure out what the lesson is. We don't want to do this again. So you're right. Okay. So I'm going to see him this afternoon. We'll see what we come up with. But that just changes everything. It's wonderful. So the other thing is that I chose to go to hell. And the way I know that is I was cradle Catholic. From the time I was teeny tiny, I was taught about heaven, purgatory, and hell. And God will judge me at the end of my life, and he'll look at everything that I did, and he'll make a decision where I go. And be prepared, Kathy, that almost nobody goes straight to heaven. Just very pure saints. Mother Teresa, she got to go to heaven. But the rest of us will have to go to hell and be purified so that we can get our sins burned off and go to heaven and be with God and be pure. I bought it. I lived my life thinking that was true. I made decisions based on that. Ooh, this is going to earn me some time. Purgatory. Maybe I better go take my mom out to lunch and balance it out. I mean, it was a big math problem, but I thought, well, maybe I got the math wrong. I added and subtracted wrong. And that's why I went to purgatory, because purgatory is just like hell, but you get out. So now all these years later, I'm thinking and hearing about people. I chose that. I chose to believe that. I chose it so that I manifested it. I brought all the terrible things that happened to me in my life that were hellish, and I just kind of made them worse. And that was my hell. It's scary to think that you have that power. And what I want to shout from the rooftops is you don't have to go. You choose to go. If you just can learn to believe that God is loving and forgiving and not judgmental, because that's the truth, then you can skip the trip. And so again, afterwards, when, every now and then being still human, a few years after that all dawned on me, I said to God one time, it's so much easier to talk to God now. He's right there. I know you said that I don't have to go and blah, 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 but just to be sure, is there a few things that maybe I could be doing now that will remind me that this is all the way it's supposed to be? So over a series of months, he gave me these words: just be loving and kind, merciful and forgiving, encouraging, grateful, non-judgmental, and useful. So I made that up on a card, and I read that every morning when I get up and look at my picture of Jesus. Dear Jesus, please help me to be. And that puts me in the frame of mind that as the day develops, that's the way to respond. So those two things are what I have to share.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I love that you've got a tail back there going.
She always comes out when I'm talking to people. I feel like she's under the bed.
Oh, cats are funny. Isn't it nice to know that the pets are in heaven?
Oh, yeah.
It's so cool. And that you can talk to them. You can even talk to them now, which I do. I've got a lot of grand dogs that went before me. And it's just so nice to know that when I pass, they'll be waiting for me.
Oh, yeah. So wonderful. But thank you so much, not only for sharing your story, but all the wisdom that you've gained in integrating your experience over the years. What you said about planning the life ahead is so inspiring to me, and how you're able to talk to your best friend about that now and figure out what the lesson is. It just makes it just takes the pressure off, at least for me. Takes the fear
for
out
me
of
too.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny too. I did a show not too long ago, and it must have been done in the Bible Belt, because there was like 100 and some on replies that went on the Facebook thing right after it. And I would say, well, 90%, I think I counted, 90% said, well, all you had to do was call on Jesus. Or Matthew 9, chapter 4 through 15, line 6 says, thou must call it. I mean, every single one of them. And 10 of them said, Kathy, I love what you said. The other 90. I thought, and I thought about that. And I thought, somebody hit me up again with that the other day. They broke in and said, well, all you had to do was call on Jesus. And I said, all right, you got to take the context. Number one, I was not at the grocery store when I ran into a demon. I was in their home. I had no idea how I got there. Everything was about hell. There was no thought of God. God doesn't go where God is not wanted. I didn't even think of it. I couldn't conceive of that. That is not my fault. So it's very different to be a spirit in the afterlife than it is to be a spirit on earth, where we have this delusion that we have some control over things. So if we get in a bad situation here, we say, help me, Jesus. And sometimes it seems like God helps. But you know what? God doesn't interrupt with our free will. And if this is the path we have chosen, God won't interrupt. So when people think, I shouldn't go down that path, this is just what I think. What I think happens is that when I'm in a pickle and I forget for a minute, oh, God, help me. God does. God gives me grace to be strong. God gives me grace to remember. God gives me grace to say, I love you, Kath. You're doing a great job. But God doesn't stop the car or make somebody, because I planned what's going to happen. And my free will, he won't stomp on that. So that's another kind of interesting thing. And again, I apologize to people telling you this is what you should think, because everybody has an experience. I can only share mine. And
Oh, no, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And you definitely have some experience to back up what you're saying. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
No, go ahead.
Do you think that is a real place you were in and those people that you saw there were real? Or do you think that it's something that's created out of our minds?
I'm going to stick with it's something we've created. I saw 2 people there that were alive. And that was kind of confusing to me, but it made sense because I thought I was alive too. What happened is I needed to give those 2 people messages that they were going down the wrong road. And when I came back, it was interesting because they were both family members. And how do you bring it up? Say, I was in hell and I saw you there. And, you've got some, and they kind of go, huh? So I had to be very careful about how I couched that. And neither one of them took it well. Let's just put it that way. One person, our relationship really deteriorated, and she hasn't spoken to me in probably 15 years. The other person came to me probably about 10 years later, and she'd just gotten divorced. She'd been in a terrible marriage. He had been treating her like a servant, using her for his own moving up the ladder, and she was miserable. So she came to me. She'd gotten the divorce. She was feeling guilty about it. She says, would you mind telling me that thing again about me? You were in hell? And I did. She says, I was in hell. I was. And you're right. And what you said kind of gave me courage to break that off. But now hearing it again, no, I feel vindicated. I feel like I don't need to feel guilty. And thanks. So that was interesting to me. Yeah. But, there's been a lot of studies done by the IONS people that just because you're a good person doesn't mean you're going to have a good NDE. Just because you're an evil person, you've killed yourself or something, you're going to have a terrible NDE. It just doesn't play out that way. Mm-hmm. A lot of times people who need to feel heaven, to be reminded of who they really are, who their spirit really is. It's just kind of a wake-up call, a gentle wake-up call that things need to change. For me, I'm no saint. I've been divorced 3 times. But that's when you get to heaven, they say, well, that was cool. It's what you decided to do. That's how you learned this, and that's how you learned that, and that's how your children learn this, and they don't apologize. You can't do anything to get God upset with you. So back to, I'm pretty sure that there is evil out there. There are people I've heard that they feel more comfortable. Their souls feel more comfortable in the dark. Somebody at the conference the other day said they almost get a timeout. All right. But you go over here and kind of sit in the dark for a while and see if that's really something you want to continue. And I'm told a couple people have seen like a really dark place where people just are like gray shadows that walk around and they don't know each other is there. They're just kind of, and they get a chance because there's free will. You can choose not to be with God. I mean, otherwise, what good is free will for? It's interesting. I mean, for all the thousands of people that have gone to the afterlife, to heaven, they all come back with different pieces of it.
Right.
There's no way we can learn all the nuts and bolts of this thing unless we go and stay.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, this is a really difficult question. I've been asking everybody this recently. If you're uncomfortable with it, I can edit it out. Not a big deal.
How much do I weigh?
Do you think there's any situation like with somebody who's done horrible atrocities on earth, murdering people or taking advantage of people? Do you think there's any type of punishment for those people?
From what I've learned, I think that if Hitler had a life review and got to feel pain of not only what he did to those actual people, but to their families and how that's rippled, I think that would be a lot of punishment.
What advice would you have for people if they do find themselves in a hellish near-death experience to get out of a place like?
Well, what I suggest in my book is to sing a Christmas carol. But you don't know. I guess don't go there. If you can take care of that now by rethinking what society, your religion, and your family has taught you for your whole life, if you can really take some time and look into some of this iron stuff and listen to some of the people that have come back and consider that maybe everything you've been taught is not true. It wasn't taught to you as a negative thing, but religion over the thousands of years has developed a lot of man-made rules and regulations to keep people in religions. So one has to almost become spiritual, maybe in addition to religious, or as most of us that come back, we drop our religions because they don't make sense anymore. I had a heck of a time. I was hounding the priest. Don't tell kids they'll make God cry if they hit their sister. I says, you're doing to work those kids' sense of thinking they can make God cry. Number one, gives them a lot of power, but stop it. You, as adults, we need to look at that very closely and consider that maybe they're not going to go to hell because God will not judge them. There is no vengeful, hateful, unmerciful God. It doesn't exist. The only one that exists is full of love and will forgive you anything.
I'd love to hear more about your journey. You grew up as a Catholic, you said, and I'd love to hear about your journey since your experience and what you believe now.
It was hard. It was very difficult. I felt a lot of guilt. I tried to go back to church. I tried to go back to Mass, and I would say the prayers. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, and blah, blah, blah. And he sits at the right hand of the Father, and there's angels. And I thought, no, there isn't. There's no thrones. I said, there isn't. No, that's not what happens. So I thought, well, I'll just pick out words. And I literally did. I would say the prayers and I would say that sentence, but I wouldn't say those two sentences. And the thing that really, really got me was how everybody wants to get their body back at the last day. We're going to rise up all these moldy bodies and jump back in them and be so happy. I don't want my body back. No, when you've been in heaven in this free spirit to get crammed back in this body that coughs and no. So there, I thought, all the reasons that I was a Catholic are falling away. I don't want those things. I don't have to work at them. I just have to be loving and kind and merciful, forgiving. Those are those whole things. I don't have to worry about, in the old days, you couldn't eat meat on Friday, or you forgot to go to it was a holy day of obligation. And no, that's not how God works at all. So I promised. And COVID was really good for me because what had happened just at the end there is I was only going on Saturday night. I don't know, it was one like Tuesdays or something. And the only people that showed up were like 12 of us, and we were all afraid of getting flu. So it was all 12 old people shotgunned all over the church. Would come time for the kiss of peace where you shake hands and we all wave at each other. And it was great. And it wasn't the priest, it was the deacon. And he was married and had 5 kids. So he gave a sermon that was 5 minutes long and had humor in it. I could do that. I was doing it. I was okay with that. I could still go to communion. But then COVID came and we couldn't go to church. It's been 2 years. Now, when I go back and be with my family in California, I go to church because they still have such problems believing me. Even they don't want to talk about it. Okay, it's threatening to them and their way. And my mom's 94. She's not going to give it up now. My sister was a reborn Christian. She's an altar girl and that whole bit. It's not up to me to throw a bomb in their beliefs. They're happy there.
Right.
They're happy there. But when I go. I just don't say the prayers and I mutter. I mutter and my mom can't hear anyway. So she doesn't know she sees my lips moving. But I'll go because it upsets them if I don't. And I always like being in. I believe God's there, and I love going to communion. I still think that reminds me how God is in me and I'm in him. And but now I'm okay. I'm okay with it. I just have to be careful.
I love what you said. And I am right there with you. Actually, I stopped attending because of the COVID shutdown also. And it was sort of like my excuse to finally let go and have a reason why.
Yeah, permission.
But I also love what you said about being understanding of other people having their beliefs. There's nothing wrong with that. And it brings them comfort. And God is in that. So thank you for sharing all of that. One more question, and then we'll talk about your book. So, and I want to preface this by saying that there's no right answer. There's no answer that I'm digging for here. I'm just like you. I was raised Christian and I've deconstructed, and I'm just curious what your beliefs are on Jesus as being raised a Catholic, and then how you sang away in the manger and then were rescued from hell.
I was a fan of Jesus when I was little. I mean, he was my buddy. My family moved around a lot. I was always the new kid. So he was always with me. He was little. And if I was 7, he was 7, it was that kind of thing. One time I was so alone as a new child, and I was playing tag on the outside for recess with Jesus. And I'd run and I'd catch him and I'd say, "You're it." And then I'd run the other way. And of course I got a reputation for being the weird kid, not only the new kid. I didn't care. But so Jesus and I have always been close, and I have always loved the parable about the prodigal son. And that's what was the biggest stepping stone for me coming back about that the prodigal kid, me, whoever it was, comes back and God throws his arms around and, and the other kids are going, "Hey, wait a minute. Hey." But that to me seemed right. When we get around to Good Friday, I have a problem with a God who is all loving and all forgiving, sending his, quote, only son down to be butchered and mutilated and destroyed so that God will forgive us. Makes no sense whatsoever. Any way you slice it. Now, Jesus was here. And this is my interpretation. I see myself as a little piece of God, and all us other billions of people, little pieces of God, and all the people on different planets and on different universes. And I see Jesus as a big piece. He was a big piece of God. And he said, we're all brothers and sisters. We're all children of God. We are. And so I see him as like the bravest soul that came down to try and teach love and forgiveness and love your neighbor as yourself. There's only one rule: love God, love your neighbor. It was all simple. Politics got involved. cultures got involved and it got distorted. So I still think Jesus is great. And as far as Savior, that doesn't apply and then anything I can reason with. The thing I see is he taught me how to live. He came down and he said, this is how you do it. And he's still my best friend.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So please tell us about your book. You've written a book about your experience and where read it and what they can expect.
I was told over and over and over, I have to write a book by the voice, in my head, and then people and ions. And you've got to write a book. So at the last conference, I ran into this lady with her little cardboard table, and she was starting her own little publishing company. And she was also a medium. I didn't know what that meant at the time, and she didn't tell me till later. But when we were closing everything up, she's putting things in boxes. I walked by her table, and again, I was doing one of these things. And she says, hey, you need to write a book. And I said, oh, and she says, I'm just the gal to do it. She holds up her card and says, now call me. And I thought, that's really direct. So I went home. I thought about it. I gave her a call. I said, what's that involve? Well, you sit down, you write out your story, you write it. It's a book. She gave me some people to talk with and all that. So I wrote out my story in my book and I sent it to her. And she says, well, that's only 10,000 words. And I said, yeah. And she says, well, you need at least 60,000. 60,000. I says, I just wrote everything I know. What am I going to do? She says, sit down and write. I says, no, that's not helpful. She says, no, it'll come. It'll come. I thought, yeah, right. So I thought about it and I thought, well, I guess I could write about my life and that would segue into why this happened to me. And then I thought, well, you wouldn't really understand that very well unless you knew my parents, and how I was raised. And then, well, then that doesn't make sense unless I have my grandparents, because my parents were raised by alcoholics and there was all this that went on. So I thought, wow, there's a lot of material there, but I don't know where to start. So I just sat down and she was right. It was like this, people say the download happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started writing and I was laughing and I was hearing these stories. I was like you would be telling me your story and I'm writing it down. And things like I'd get up in the middle of the night and I would hear like my grandmother say, now don't forget the time that this and this and this. And I have to get up and make notes or she wouldn't be quiet. And I had a lot of help, and I kept going and this went on and on and on. And she said, you need more. So I got to like 60,152 words. And I said, I'm done. I hadn't come up with any more. She says, that's fine. It'll give us room to edit. And the editor went through it. She said, well, this chapter needs to be up here and this will make more sense if you put this there. And you spelled that wrong and you need an apostrophe. And I had a book. So it just kind of made itself with a lot of inspiration and help from my relatives. And there's a lot of humor in it because my family is known to be quite humorous and a little on the nutty side. So there's a lot of humor with a tragedy. That's how my family survives. That's our MO. If we can find a little humor in something, we can survive it. And boy, hell, nobody has a sense of humor. That was the worst thing about hell. Worst thing.
Where can people get a copy of your book?
Well, it's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and let's see, my website, but it's cheaper on Amazon. And I've got the book and the Kindle and the Audible is coming shortly. We had a little snafu with the Audible, so we had to take it off the market and it's coming back on. It seems that sometimes this is pretty typical. People who have been on the other side have problems with electricity. When they get
Yep, I have a big problem with electronics.
I bet you do on your podcast. I had one podcast. It was Kirsty Salisbury over in Australia. And we had it all ready to go. And all of a sudden it was dark. And she's, oh my God, the entire block just went down. Because she'd had an experience. I had an experience. She says, we'll have to do this another time. She said, I've lived here 10 years. It's never happened. And we just both laughed. I thought, well, that's pretty typical.
Yeah. The only reason I can do this, and I think we definitely planned this ahead. I'm married to a network engineer, and I go to computers like 3 or 4 computers a year because they die on me, and he just keeps supplying more.
You're cheating. Shoot, that's great.
But anyway, I will have all of Kathy's links, her website, her social media, her book, everything will be in my description. So please check it out. Kathy, thank you so much. This has been one of the best conversations I've ever had. You are so inspiring. I love your energy and your passion. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Well, thank you. This has really been fun. I really enjoyed it. I love your show. I'm going to keep watching it.
Thank you. Thank you for watching the Love Covered Life podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and comment with your thoughts and opinions, and check the description box for the links to my free community where I share lots of resources, my Pay What You Can community where we do classes and challenges together, my TikTok, Instagram, my Clips channel, and lovecoveredlife.com where I share my paintings. Thank you so much for your support.